And we will send out the recording to you and all of your teammates so that you can watch the recording after. So with that, I'll pass it over to Joe for a welcome and introductions.
Bonjour, Anin, Migwan Indígena Cosmic Nakwajing, Ndonji. Joseph L. Tobgi from Turtle Mountain. I've been with NGC for about 6 weeks now, so I'm very excited to be here and honored to be supporting Shakopee in the civics workshop. One way that we like to start off these workshops is, really through reflection, and Levi has done something very impressive within his community, and I just want to read a quote. So it's not that the government should take care of the people, it's that we, the people, should take care of each other. We are the government. And that really embodies really the heart and soul of the civics work that we're really trying to support tribal nations with. Next slide, please. Okay, this is my actual introduction. So again, I've been with NGC for 6 weeks. Joseph L. Tobgi, NGC project director. I'm a citizen of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Nation. I hold an MBA and a bachelor's degree in management, and I'm a Native Nation rebuilder from cohort 3. Pretty exciting stuff. I've served my nation in more than a decade working to address systemic challenges in various roles, including leading nonprofit organizations, supporting workforce development, also as an elected representative of my tribe in the judicial branch of government, where I served as judicial board chairman for 2 terms. I've worked to support policy tribally and at the state level, and have provided or supported strategic planning and tribal sovereignty throughout the entirety of my work after becoming a rebuilder, understanding my civic responsibility and my role in tribal government and supporting tribal governance. I'm a husband and a father to a strong Native woman and 4 daughters. I have no sons. And one thing about me, a personal thing, is that I really enjoy spending time outside. And with that, I will turn it over to Michelle to do her introduction.
All right, bonjour everyone. My name is Michelle Redday, and I'm a program coordinator here at NGC. I'm a member of the Bay Mills Indian community, and I was born and raised in Michigan, but I currently live in Bemidji, Minnesota. My educational background is in higher education, community organizing, social work, and Indigenous studies. My professional experience has been in higher education in the tribal college movement. I've also worked in K-12 schools and in early childhood education. I also have experience in grant writing, and I'm really passionate about language revitalization. I enjoy being outdoors with my partner and children, doing seasonal activities. This picture just brings back warmth for me since it's a day from berry picking last summer, and I'm really looking forward to it warming up again and for the sap to start running. The quote that I wanted to share with you all is from Chief Wilma Mankiller, who was the first female principal chief of the Cherokee Nation. The most fulfilled people are the ones who get up every morning and stand for something larger than themselves. They're the people who care about others, who will extend a helping hand to someone in need, or will speak up about an injustice when they see it. To me, this really connects to our civic engagement work because we're wanting to bring in all members of our community to work together to improve our nations. All right, well, before diving in to what today is going to look like, we wanted to give you all an overview of what our entire time together will look like. We have 4 virtual workshops. The first one today is where we'll be doing an overview of the Tribal Civics program. The goal of today is really to get everyone up to speed on what Tribal Civics is, why it's important, and to get everyone excited to bring this type of programming to your community. Our next workshop will focus on gathering information. Through this, we'll identify some goals that you all have for creating a similar program in your own area. And we'll also identify possible topics that you would like to cover and do a little bit of community mapping of resources so that we can start to identify where some of these bits of information live within your community. Sometimes that's books, but other times it's people in your community that you might want involved. So those really engaging those knowledge keepers to make that civics project really impactful. In our third workshop, we'll work on pulling that all together. Obviously, some of you have a lot of experience putting courses together and providing education in your community. So we'll be looking to learn from you all and your expertise in pulling in resources in an engaging way and be able to gather feedback as well. And then lastly, we'll be doing our reflections and lessons learned. The big point here I want to note is that we will have you all do a presentation that will take about 25 minutes, and you can do it together as a group, and it doesn't have to be super formal, but we're really just looking for you to share your ideas about what your tribal civics education plan will look like and to get some feedback. So throughout these workshops, we will build to that plan and presentation. And after each workshop, we'll have recommendations on things that you can work on to prepare for that presentation. For that last workshop, we'll also be bringing in Levi Brown to present so that he can share, one, the lessons learned throughout his process of implementing Leech Lake Civics, and he'll also be listening to your presentation as well to provide some feedback and have some conversations there. So, diving deeper into our agenda for today, you all did receive this in your email, so there shouldn't be any surprises here. After this opening and welcome, we'll do a little kinship building activity, hopefully have a little bit of fun and get to know each other a little bit more. We'll go into some content in the overview of what Tribal Civics Project is and why it's important. At 2:05, we'll be sure to give you a quick 15-minute health break to give you a chance to step away from your computers, stretch, and have a little break. When we return from the break, we'll spend some time learning more about the Leech Lake Civics course. With that, we'll follow with another 5-minute break. And finally, we'll come back for a visioning activity of what you think success will look like for your project and trying to imagine how this will work in your community. By 4 p.m., you will all have made it through your first workshop. So I'll now pass it back to Joe, who will go through our meeting agreements.
We want to conduct the meeting in a good way, so we think it's definitely appropriate to have some meeting agreements and some things that we'd like to talk about. I think it's important to stay present as much as possible. Be mindful of how much you've contributed. Be gentle with yourself and others. Stay hydrated. We definitely want you to be well and healthy. Practice self-care and community care. Engage and participate in addition to what you're seeing on the screen as agreements. We also want to take an opportunity to give you an opportunity to add some agreements that you'd like to add as well. So if anyone would like to add something they think would be valuable to support our meetings, now's the time. Okay, hearing no comments, we will assume that everyone is fine with the agreements.
Wonderful.
Okay, we'll move on to the next exercise, Michelle.
Absolutely. If anything comes to mind, we can always add those in as we go throughout the workshop. But now we wanted to get into some fun and get to know each other a little bit more. So we did send out a link to this Jamboard. If you've had a chance to do it before the workshop, great. If not, that's totally fine. We have plenty of time to do it right now. I know some folks were able to log in prior to the session, but I'll go ahead and drop the link in the chat now. Drop the link in the chat now so that folks can log in. Is anyone familiar with Jamboard? Have you folks used it before? Yeah, seeing some thumbs up, but some head nods no. So wonderful. Well, we use this tool in our workshops as a way for folks to share, engage, and it's a tool that we can download and save the information for later. So seems to be pretty user-friendly. But again, wanted to just use this chance to get to know everyone a little bit more. You'll see Joe's example is here on the screen. It's also the first slide of the Jamboard. So you'll also know on the top right here in the middle, you can slide over to toggle to the next frame. So like I said, we can see some folks were already able to get in, which is great. So let's see. So we want you to ask a couple of questions. In the orange sticky note, we'd like you to answer why you wanted to participate. Oh, and blue one, sorry. There we go. No, Joe's colors are funky. We wanted to know why you wanted to participate in this project. In the pink sticky note, everyone is asked to share a fun fact, which can be a lot of pressure. So we also said that it could be a boring fact. We won't decide if your fact is fun or boring. You can be the judge of that. Just go ahead and put it in the sticky note here. Where it might get a little more technical is that we would like you to add a picture that represents who you are. It doesn't necessarily need to be yourself either, but to do so, you'll go to this side toolbar here. There's a photo icon, so you'll just click that, and you should be able to upload an image that way. Down in the green box is asking you to insert a GIF or GIF, whichever you prefer, to describe how you feel about tribal civics. If gifts are difficult for you too, you can choose to just add a photo, and you'll do that the same way that you add the photo. With a GIF, you most likely will have to go to Google search to find one, download it to your computer or phone, and then upload it that way. Awesome. So we'll go ahead and give you folks a few minutes to get that started. I'll leave this instruction site up since it has some tips around resizing and adding text. And for the folks that already completed it, thank you for doing so. If you don't mind waiting around for your participants, your fellow participants to get in there and add their fun information. Throw a little bit of music up for our work time, and we'll share out afterwards.
Sober, I became an MC, messing up on stage cause I care what people think. I needed your influence, I don't care what people think. See, for me to feel great, man, I needed that drink. Graduated school and flushed the lick down the sink. Now I gotta be you for kids who wanna be me. I was young, Jim went in, one and out one. Cause even though he's GOAT, I was outdone. How I'm supposed to stay inspired by the Top Gun when they never say a word about him, not one. All I heard was Tyson, Jackson, and Jordan. It made me feel like other races were more than. On top of that, I had identity crisis. I thought not even sports could save me from how serious my life is. Young native growing up without his culture. No role models to show me it was out here. Didn't have a daddy, mom was gone for weeks. You would think it's romance the way you swept us off our feet. The foster home is the modern day boarding school. Kill the Indian and say the man, you know the rule. Matter of fact, old Jim Thorpe knew it too. It took the life from us and made it all dark and blue. We were all athletically gifted, but when we played them white kids, somehow we just missed it. In them big street football games, I see now it's more mental than anything. Became resentful of my one true queen. Started clouding everything with blunts and things. Giving women fists instead of diamond rings, when they deserve my heart and all the finer things. Dang, old Jim, we got a lot in common. I'm glad I finally came around to put the time in, cause you're the type of hero I know I could vibe with. A legendary native athlete is what I miss. At least I can share your legacy with my kid. Them other athletes are dope, but they ain't go. Nope. Sitting Bo was brave, but ain't your war ain't sport. It's time I shut up about your name, but they ain't spoke. All I hear about is cheese, but they're all like the seats. Man, I wish I could've seen you play ball on TV. I wish that you received the same notoriety the mass media has given all these other athletes. I just needed someone great who looked like me. Jim Thorpe, you could be my Muhammad Ali. Afflicted with addiction, alcoholic like Pete. No submitting, both spitting up in college like G's. My focus not there, we probably both got B's. You're the star RB, I skip the smoke trees. When I finally got sober, I became an MC. Messing up on stage cause I care what people think. I needed your influence, I don't care what people think. See, for me to feel great, man, I needed that drink. Graduated school and flushed the lick down the sink. Now I gotta be you for kids who wanna be me. First of all, let's define what's the greatest. It ain't about marketing and being famous. So we can't exclude the nameless and faceless just because they didn't have the frames then to trace it. With that said, let's get down to some basics. I don't think a one sport athlete can claim it unless all the measurables reach out to the spaces. Haven't seen that, it's just facts that I'm stating. There's a lot of great names erased on that basis. In baseball, Jordan never made it to the majors. Boxing was the only sport Ali made the papers, but he used his platform to fade all the races. So next to Jim Thorpe, he's my vote for the A-list. Bo was the first two-sport all-star, but Jim Thorpe epitomized durability. A star in many sports with great versatility. He won gold in the Olympic decathlon, a 10-event competition. Can you grasp on? Play football with no face mask on, a 3-time champ with the Bulldogs of Canton. And to be clear, he put his teams on his back as a place kicker, punter, and a running back. Put the ball in his hands and he run it back. An All-American college football champ. He was decent playing Major League Baseball. If you don't know about him, you should probably facepalm. Got inducted into 3 major Hall of Fame, track and field, the NFL, and the NCAA. Somehow these sports fans still got nothing to say. I guess they didn't have Sports Center in his day. Leather shoes, no drugs, no hope. To accomplish all that, bro, he's gotta be GOAT. All I hear about is cheese, but they're all on deceased. Man, I wish I could've seen you play ball on TV. I wish that you received the same notoriety the mass media has given all these other athletes. I just needed someone great who looked like me. Jim Thorpe, you could be my Muhammad Ali. Afflicted with addiction, alcoholic like Pete. No submitting, both spitting up in college like G's. My focus not there, we probably both got B's. You're the star RB, I skip the smoke trees. When I finally got sober, I became an MC. Messing up on stage cause I care what people think. I needed your influence, I don't care what people think. See, for me to feel great, man, I needed that drink. Graduated school and flushed the lick down the sink. Now I gotta be you for kids who wanna be me.
are made of stars. We know who we are. We know where we've been and what we survived. All our ancestors did to keep us alive. It's inside you. They're like guides. We are made of stars. We know who we are. Together as constellations, we carry generations in each beat of our hearts. It's what sets us apart. We are made of stars.
Well, I could never imagine the pain in the mother's heart when life takes a turn for the worse and creators art becomes another canvas that will never be completed. I'm a few degrees away and 1,000 times defeated. My energy's depleted, but I wanna stand and fight, swinging with the spirits that I've traveled back into the light. I feel the tears and depression, fears and aggression, woven in society from years of oppression. The violence is normalized, silence is horrifying, truth is denied, and the fact is that more are dying. You don't have to tell me how you
All right, we'll give folks just one more minute to wrap up their work in the Jamboard before we come back together. Might be searching still to find that perfect GIF to put in to describe your mood. I'm really loving all of the ones that have been submitted so far. Such great energy. Yeah, it's really exciting to hear.
It's hard to listen, but listen, 'cause it's much harder living it than listening to the hardships, so the heart's conditioning.
All right, well, I think we've got folks that have filled it out, and if not, I can also help, if you've had trouble with the GIFs or with the GIFs, putting things in. But yeah, why don't we have Joe go ahead and start sharing with his introduction and page.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. When I was doing this exercise to show a photo of who I was, I didn't really have any great photos, but I really, this is our family pet. We call her Belly Rub or Princess. And I'm a family man and I prioritize family over everything else. And in this photo, I'm actually taking her back to my daughter. And so she spent a weekend with us, and I make special trips for our pets and to reunite them with family. So a little bit of who I am. And thinking about how I felt about civics, I just love the photo, excited, partying. With all the moves, in a lot of ways, that's what civics represents to me. Be excited in your community and sharing and expressing yourself in a way that impacts others. I thought this GIF did that for me. A boring or fun fact about me. Definitely not boring putting them up because it's so time consuming, but I do put up computerized Christmas light display each year, and I can get it to dance to the music and different things. And so that's something that I do for my kids and my family, and they really enjoy that. Okay, why I wanted to participate in this? Well, I work for NGC, but why I wanted to participate in civics even prior to being a part of this great organization is that, it really empowers you to empower your nation. The more you know, and the more you can give of yourself to create a stronger nation, the more successful your nation is going to be. And I really think that embodies civics. So with that, thank you, Michelle. I don't know if you want me to call in the next person or if.
Yeah, feel free.
Okay, Mary.
Hi, everyone. I am the director of Tribal Records and have been with the tribe for 15 years. The bulk of my career has been in IT. And so it was a great fit to move into Tribal Records because there is so much of a technology component to the job. I have a great staff. They're very, very good. I can't say enough about them. So we recently sort of republished a community member guide and targeting our 18 to 21-year-olds initially, and with the help of marketing, put together, I think, a really good publication with lots of materials. But the feedback that we got too was around tribal civics and just educating our youth around tribal civics. And so I've gotten really interested in that. Kind of a, I guess, fun or boring fact, my dream job would be to be a fishing guide for kids. I met a woman in the Keys once that was her job. She took kids fishing, and if the fish weren't biting, they were snorkeling. And I was like, you were living the dream. And to me, tribal civics civics period is all about peace and all about all of us understanding each other, I guess.
Thank you so much, Mary. Carissa?
Hello, everyone. For those of you that might not know me, my name is Carissa Pickett. The reason I kind of got in this project or wanted to participate, I'm kind of a person that brings everyone, that pulls from everyone. I get along with pretty much everybody within the tribal community, so I just like to aid in that way. If there's anything that anyone needs during this project from a certain someone or a certain somebody, I hope that I can provide some assistance with that. But yeah, I love K-pop and all things Disney. That's what my daughter and I do. We go to K-pop concerts when we can. They're getting really expensive because K-pop is on a rampage right now. So that's a little fun thing to know about me. And all things Disney, as you can see in my picture, we were in the new Star Wars land at Disney World. We just got off a K-pop concert in that picture as well. So we just drove up to Disney for a day and we did that. And then my little gift is the more you know. No knowledge is bad knowledge, I don't think. So just with our community, getting more knowledge about ourselves and then also to the public as well about who we are, what we are, all those questions that we always get asked would be better. So that's it.
Thank you, Carissa. We'll move on to the next. And Rebecca. We're both muted. I'm trying to tell you you're muted, but I was muted.
Nope, thank you. I'm usually better at that now that we've been using Zoom for almost 3 years, but sometimes you just forget. No, I was saying I kind of opened this up and in my introduction said, why I'm really excited about this project. Anything that can move our community forward and that we can, collaborate as community members. We have an amazing staff here at SMSC who also have a ton to contribute. So I love the collaboration that these workshops bring to this project, and anything we can do to move our community forward, I think is definitely worth our time. So my picture, my family, I'm a mom, a wife, and I get to be a tribal leader here in this community, which I'm also grateful for. That picture was actually taken at the inauguration. So I've been grateful for the community support and really enjoy my job and what I get to do. So a boring fact, I am a total nerd and I absolutely love spreadsheets, and I love pretty spreadsheets even more. So when I do projects or make things, my papers, spreadsheets, whatever, documents usually look pretty nice because I just geek out over good looking documents. So, and my Anna GIF, yeah, I'm just really excited. So thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. That's awesome. David.
I don't think we have David with us.
Okay. Does anyone want to say a few things for David? I'm joking.
I guess I will. I can. So David's my brother.
No, I'm joking, Chris. And it doesn't look like we have Mercedes either. No? Okay, Keely. Chris,
I'm
you
here. I'm
you
here.
can get David.
Okay. I'm Keely. I'm a community member at the SMSC. I couldn't get a GIF up on my phone, but my picture is me and my husband. We got married a year ago now in January. And yeah, and I'm a dog and cat mom, proud dog and cat mom. They're actually on my sweatshirt right now. And kind of just a little boring but basic. I'm always willing to learn more about our community, Native American history, culture, laws, all of that stuff. I'll be 26 in April, so I just kind of like to being on the younger side of our generation in the community. I think that anything like these would be so good for the future of our community in the younger aspects. So just excited to learn. And kind of a fun fact, me and my husband are huge wake surfers. So you'll always find us on the lake in the summer. And I was able to do 360s in a row last summer. So that's my fun fact.
Thank you, Keely. That was awesome. And I'm hoping you have a video to evidence what you just shared, because I'm not going to believe it unless we see a video.
Oh, of course, I do.
Well, maybe if we have time, you can share with the group.
Sure.
Do we have anyone else? And we do. Joanna.
Joanna did tell me she is not able to make any of the workshops. Just so I was sad about that, but just so you guys know.
Okay, thank you. Kellen?
Hi, everybody. For those that don't know me, my name is Kellen. I'm the supervisor of education in the education department. Obviously, one of the things that is very important to me in taking this class is being able to empower the youth and to pass that information along to them. That's obviously a huge part of my job and something very near and dear to my heart. My picture is I'm a dog mom too. My picture is of my puppy Maxwell. And I, in college, was in a lot of different theater productions. That actually was part of my degree. And one of the cool things I got to do was learn how to be trapeze artistry kind of thing. And I was in a show, which was really cool. That's me.
Thank you so much. That's exciting. And I'm looking forward to the videos as well.
It's been about 15 years, so I wouldn't ask me to do that now.
we're gonna definitely cut some of the content, and we're just gonna have a fun portion of this where we're just looking at all the videos of all of your talent. So that's gonna be great. Joking, but Daniel.
Hi everybody, how are you? I'm Dan Morgan. I am the very new Director of Education. I think this is day number 8 that I have been with the community. So I'm very, very new. And that's really one of the key reasons why I wanted to join the workshop. I've been an educator my entire career. I'm a big fan of history as well and studied history for a long time. So I recognize the importance of civics. I think it's really a key topic for everybody to be studying. And I'm really excited to see how that unfolds within this particular community and how that affects this community in a unique way. So that's one of the reasons I was really excited to join. And the photo that you see of me is there not too far from Parliament in London. I lived and worked in the UK for 5 years. It was one of the most formative experiences of my both personal and professional life. Really enjoyed my time there and learned so much about business and personal stuff, and it was just great, and I loved it. I was once a paid stuntman, even longer ago than when Kellen was a trapeze artist. And I was even in a commercial where they dressed me up in one of those suits that makes you much bigger than you actually are. And I did a bunch of gymnastics and flips around a restaurant and around a bunch of tables for a restaurant commercial in California. So, and it's not on YouTube. I looked, thankfully it's not out there, so you can't find it, which is probably a good thing. And the photo I have there, I picked that photo because I do believe that civics really is all about us being in this together. I think that matches the quote that we had at the beginning, but also because I don't know if you know this movie, Christmas Vacation, but this scene is like after everything goes wrong and there's this massive struggle. And Chevy Chase is like, we're going to do this. We're all in this together and you got to come along with me, whether you like it or not. And sometimes that's how I feel about civics education, because people come along kicking and screaming, but it's still really important and you still got to bring them there. And so that's why I chose that picture.
Thank you, Dan. That was great. And I know that although the video is not on YouTube, you do have it in your personal collection. So we'll be adding that to the content of this. Okay. Michelle.
Oh yeah, so I'll hop in again. Like Joe said, I would love to see all these videos. So maybe we'll make time in the fourth workshop to share out on that. The photo I shared here is just of my family. Let me see, maybe last summer or 2 summers ago. The first time I got all my kids out on the lake with us. You can see my littlest one there in the ergo on her dad. We really love to be outside. So this is just a really fun day. You can see my middle daughter's fashion with her sunglasses. She's a pretty cool kid. Why I love civics. I just love connecting and engaging with my community members on issues they're passionate about. I found so many folks have just really like focused areas that they want to make a difference on and can. And it's really exciting to bring folks together to improve the quality of life for our nations. My GIF is from Reservation Dogs. I'm pretty sure I had almost all of these outfits that the girls are dancing in. If you saw the Aunties episode, you know what I'm talking about, but definitely had the overalls and the basketball jersey. But just love the idea of the teamwork and their time together as they grew up and yeah, just joining together, dancing and having fun. And then my fun fact is that I lost my front tooth skateboarding when I was 18 and still have my original flipper in. I won't pop it out for you right now, but that is a really useful fun fact that I have for kids that makes me like seem really cool when I share that. So
Thank you, Michelle. That was great. And Bill.
Yeah, so I've worked for the tribe for a number of years, and first of all, I am a part-time clown, so I just threw one of the pictures out there. I love the piece about being a clown is that you're in a different environment and you get to do some weird things. So I've gone up to at least 2 congressmen who I thought they knew who I was. I gave them a big hug. One of them was like, "Oh, get away from me." So I love doing that, and that's why I felt like I needed to show that picture. I really wanted to thank everyone for setting this up, for being on here. Carissa, I'm happy that you're on here, and I love the stories that you share. And I think the thing is I really have always wanted to do something like this or be part of it for this tribe. I know that we've had some starts, and I feel really good about the plan here. Fun fact, traveled a lot. I lived in Asia for quite a bit, so it was easy to travel to a bunch of countries. And then, the feeling I put up is a homer, and I kind of feel like I've always thought about this, and it looks like we have a great team to take this to the next step. So I'm really pumped up.
Thank you, Bill. That's great. And at first I was wondering if that was really a picture of you, or if that was really your personality, and or you're just a jokester and stuff. So that's interesting. Thank you for sharing. And Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa Tittle. I am the Human Services Administrator for the community. I was initially hired about almost a year and a half ago to focus on family and children services. And then was offered this position. So I actually manage both family and children services in the education department. So let's see here. I had trouble loading the GIFs and the photos and everything. So Why I want to participate in this project is I think that knowledge is key and knowledge is power. And what I do understand about the community is that there are a lot of younger members. And so I think providing this and helping with this project to help to maintain the community and help the community grow is what's going to be very important for the future of the community. I was a history major. That's what my bachelor's degree is in. And so I took a lot of civic courses when I was in college. And so, you know, it's good to have the knowledge, but to also be able to share that knowledge for the citizens of the community. It's not a boring fact, but a fun fact is I'm a Nana. I have a 3-year-old grandson, and I enjoy mostly spending time with him, primarily on the weekends. And so Miles is our pride and joy. If I was able to load my gift, I think one that I chose is said knowledge is power. And a photo, if I was able to upload my photo, it would probably be just one of just my family. And my family now really just includes me and my husband, since both of our kids are grown and out of the house. And we have a couple, well, we have a little Cocker Spaniel now, Copper. So he's our kid.
Thank you so much for sharing, Lisa. And it looks like we are right at time to begin our next part of this presentation, where we'll be looking at an overview of the Tribal Civics Project. So Michelle, that's all you.
Hey, Joe, I don't mean to interrupt, but David jumped on. I don't know if you want to give him a chance to introduce himself.
Absolutely. We can make some time. David, welcome.
Sorry, David, to put you on the spot, but I know.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that, Becca. I was just about to start making lunch.
Let's start with a fun fact or a boring fact about yourself, David.
A boring fact. I'm very hungry right now, and I'm about to make some lunch.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm just kind of here because I got an invite. Are we supposed to tell our favorite GIF? Oh, feelings about civics. I would probably put in that one Homer where he goes back in the leaves like this. Yeah. So that's my feelings about civics, I guess. But
right.
Yeah, I'll let you guys move on to whatever you were getting up to.
Okay, thank you, David. There'll be opportunities for more sharing as we move forward. Get some lunch. And Michelle, if you're ready to move forward.
Absolutely.
I'm going to see if I can find that GIF for David.
Well, thank you all for indulging us in that kind of fun activity. As Native people, building kinship is really important, and it's kind of hard to do over Zoom. So we try to do, use these engaging activities as a way to get to know each other a little more before diving in. But now we can get into the content for today. So we'll look at the overview of the Tribal Civics Project. We'll actually be starting with a video that was produced by NGC and PBS. In the video, you'll see Nuada Hidatsa College President Twyla Baker, who also serves on NGC's board of directors, and Levi Brown, who is a rebuilder and the inspiration for the Tribal Civics Project. So we'll go ahead and play that now.
It's a civic responsibility. People hear that and they think back to their civics class when they're in high school and they just kind of automatically shut off. But we really need to revitalize that energy behind it and really engage with our young people so that they can bring their energy into what we're trying to do. We need to reach back into our own history and make the connection in regards to how we were civically involved.
Think about how much time is spent with every elementary student, middle school student, high school student on civics. They teach US civics, Minnesota civics, maybe even county, maybe even the local, issue with the city. When do we talk about the original, the first people? When do we have that conversation?
It's not a foreign concept. It's not something that was necessarily introduced when colonizers showed up. We invented democracy on this continent. We actively engaged and thought about the future of our young people and our elders because we had to. It was just a survival mechanism.
When I look at telling that narrative, it lays the foundation for nation building. Everybody has to have ownership. Everybody has to believe in what we are doing. Because once they believe, they'll own it, just as though they built it solely by themselves.
I think that video does a really good job of encapsulating why we're here, and what the focus of today is going to be. All right, pull up our slide deck. Wonderful. So as they mentioned in the video, this governance and civic engagement, well, maybe we didn't use those terms prior to colonization. This isn't a new concept. Our people have always had very intricate systems of taking care of one another, of being good relatives, of thinking for the future. And so when we think about engaging folks in tribal civics, it's really more of a coming home to what we've always known. And it's not this foreign concept that, was imposed on us through colonizations. When we had our own governance structures were in place, our goal was to achieve harmony between community members and in our communities. So we recognize that it's more than just human beings that exist. It's the trees, it's the four-leggeds, it's everybody who's living. And so we know that we need that reciprocity between the different societies that live in our world, because we can't exist if we don't have that. We strove for all of those living beings to live in harmony, and we had this drive to look out for the collective welfare. Looking outside of our region, there were groups like the Yakima, the Umatilla, the Nez Perce, Cape Cayuse, and other tribes of that area that really had this egalitarian society, which was based on cooperation, sharing, hospitality, and responsibility for this common welfare. And we really emphasized this consensus building again. Again, looking outside of our region at the Haudenosaunee, a lot of the federal and state governing systems that were built on the Haudenosaunee Great Law of Peace and their practices in that community. They made all final decisions unanimously. So if one person that disagreed, they didn't go through with that decision. All council leaders were to be of one heart, one mind, and one law, which was their guiding philosophy. And this requirement to have these unanimous decisions meant that all leaders had to consider the balance of all viewpoints. And so when we think about that in contrast with kind of our majority rules voting system, there's nothing wrong with that. It's efficient, it moves things along. There's kind of this clear answer. But what it does is create the sort of winner-loser situation, and we see those dynamics sometimes playing out in our tribal leadership and in our nation as a whole. So this is important when we think about tribal civics, because when we think about things in our governance that aren't working, a lot of the times it is those foreign concepts that were imposed upon us. So it's only through building this tribal civics movement that we can kind of rectify some of those issues, and we can make those changes to our governance a lot more reflective of how we used to do things, and in the ways that work much better for our communities. Another thing that was really strong in our nations has been this strong sense of self-sufficiency and self-responsibility, and for others. This idea of self-sufficiency, again, looking outwards at the Yakima, there was a clear sense of responsibility both for one's own actions, but also for the welfare of others. We taught our children to be self-sufficient, and this is just so different than the system that the U.S. federal government has created for our tribal nations, where historically they've wanted to create this form of dependency. We know this in our traditional ways. We were taught to take care not only of ourselves, but of each other, and to look out for your relatives. A lot of our leaders weren't necessarily the ones with the most power. They were the ones that were the most generous and gave away almost everything that they had. And those were who we recognized as our leaders. So you've probably been sitting here for 45 minutes and you're like, okay, what is tribal civics? Why is this important? Why are we gathered here today? As in the Tribal Civics Guide that you read, Merriam-Webster defines tribal civics as a social science that deals with the rights and duties of citizens. And so that's fine, but what does that really mean? Well, really what we're hoping to do through tribal civic engagement is to encourage and empower and get people excited to engage in governmental processes by learning two things. One, their rights and responsibilities as individuals, and then two, the roles and functions of government institutions. As tribal citizens, we have the power to address these issues and solve problems in our communities ourselves at the grassroots level. We don't always have to rely on tribal leaders to get everything done. And when we think about how much our tribal leaders do, some nations have maybe 10 at most in some communities, but for most, it's much less than that. And that's a lot of responsibility and expectations to place on 5 human beings who may change out, who may not necessarily be there for their entire lives. And so we're really relying on this small group of elected leaders to solve all the issues. Well, of course, we're going to have some lingering issues that they're just not aware of or maybe don't have time to get to because there's maybe a pandemic, poverty. We're constantly trying to put out all of these fires that our tribal leaders are responsible for, that they may not have the time or capacity to really get to think about those big, exciting kind of 7th generation ideas. So again, here's another quote from one of our board members, again, Dr. Baker. "There's no one individual who can fix everything for us. It's going to take everyone. Passing all the pressure on singular human beings, no matter how amazing they are, isn't fair and absolves us of our responsibility. Ask yourself where you could be helping." Of course, this isn't anything bad to say about tribal leaders. They're elected by their people, and they're the leaders we trust to move our communities forward in a good way. But if we think back on our pre-colonial times, if you saw an issue in your community, it was your responsibility to gather the people together and identify those issues yourselves and take responsibility in creating solutions. So that's really what we're trying to do here with Tribal Civics, to teach folks they do have this power to change, to make big changes, regardless of if they're an elected leader, who their employer is, who their family is. Really, if you're a part of this tribal nation in community, you have that ability to push things forward. And so then lastly, I'm thinking about the impact of our Tribal Civics Project and civic education in general. One of the big impacts is that it revitalizes Indigenous knowledge. So by integrating our culture and traditional knowledge into our governance, we're able to build up community confidence in our systems, which again only increases engagement and increases that spread of Indigenous knowledge that we all hold deep within ourselves. It restores hope and pride in our nation, and again, building up that confidence. Having this pride allows us to hope for the future and know that we can make a difference if we harness the wisdom of our ancestors. It also teaches us and reminds us to be good relatives. Kinship is so sacred and powerful in our communities. And being a good relative, when you boil it down, really just means working to make life better for everyone. So in terms of civic engagement, that can look like attending council meetings and asking tough questions that impact your community. Civic education also encourages a 7th generation mindset. Again, this helps us create these sustainable systems that work for the entire community and will continue to work in the future. It will also provide these points for when things aren't working so that we can change and we can modify and adapt to our current situations. It then inspires this next generation that you spoke about wanting to engage, to become the leaders. Right now, sometimes there can be a challenging perception of leadership because there's a lot of negativity that can be baked into those roles. And it's hard to encourage our young folks to come home, to stay, and to serve our people when there might not be that kind of hope and inspiration. So increasing civic engagement can lead to these next generation of leaders feeling proud and feeling like they have the capability and that they can be those leaders we so desperately want and need. And lastly, civics strengthens tribal sovereignty. We really need these sovereignty warriors who are armed with the knowledge about our history and hard-fought rights. We can see a lot of our issues being challenged in the Supreme Court right now. So really more than ever, we need folks of all generations, of all tribal communities to be willing to step up and defend that sovereignty by knowing our rights and by knowing our history. So now that we've kind of briefly gone over what civics is and the impacts it has, I'm going to hand it back over to Joe for another brainstorming activity.
Thank you, Michelle. That was great. Okay, guys, we want to take and give everyone 5 minutes to individually brainstorm, and we want you to all just do some deep thinking about really how would you really define and explain civics. And another way of thinking of that is what comes to mind when you hear tribal civics, and why do you think the Tribal Civics Initiative is important? So we'll give you 5 minutes, and then when we come back, we're going to do another group share out, and it'll be fun. And we're going to record that as well so that you guys will all have this information as we move forward.
All right, we can come back together, kind of do a group share out.
Okay, is there anyone that would like to start and share their answer to the first question? You know, how would you define or explain tribal civics, and what comes to mind when you hear tribal civics?
I guess I'm willing to go first.
Great, Bill. Thank you.
So I look at tribal civics as really understanding tribal government to its fullest.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, did you want to stay in this section, or do you want to move down and give them the volunteers an opportunity to answer the second question as well?
Folks can answer the second question too. I'll just be taking notes on this. We'll send you the PDF of this Jamboard out afterwards, so you can kind of reflect on your thoughts too. So feel free to answer the second question if you'd like.
And
to Bill's point, I would say also understanding the roles and responsibilities within tribal government.
That's great. Thank you, Mary. Bill, did you want to answer the second question? Why do you think a tribal civics initiative is important?
Yes, fully informed tribal members make better decisions.
That's great. Thank you, Bill. Mary, did you want to take a shot at the second question as well?
Sure. And actually to add into that, I think it's building, it's not only elders and adults serving as role models that makes it important, but it's also, it gives youth something to strive for, I guess.
Thank you. How about Krissa? Krissa, would you like to share your answer to the first question? How would you define or explain tribal civics?
I just kind of like did little bullet points, tribal community led, sometimes challenging discussions, young to old, and then the rights and duties of the SMSC members. I know I'm a throw it out there person, I guess. Can't form sentences.
And why do you think it's important?
I think it's important to get the whole story from old to now, like where did we start, where are we now, where do we look for the future, and always recognizing this didn't spring out of nowhere. Like our ancestors really had to work hard to get where we are today, and where we're going in the future is important as well.
Thank you. That's great. David, did you want to weigh in on the questions?
Sure. I don't know if my answer will be good, I guess.
There's no wrong answers, so share your thoughts.
I mean, I liked what you guys were saying about all the like DIY and like grassroots and like mutual aid and what was it, like, what was the other thing? Like all of that sort of stuff. Like those are all really interesting things that I think are important when it comes to like tribal civics. Because like, I don't know, I guess I lost my train of thought.
No, that's great. You know, tribal civics is grassroots. You know, it's in the communities. It's the discussions that people have, you know, at the dinner table. It's while visiting with your friends. So absolutely, David, thank you. And why do you think it's important?
I just think that it's, you know, like that's sort of like not waiting for permission thing, and like, you know, kind of, I think that's a really traditional thing too, because like you go out in the world and like, you know, you're given a lot of what you need. You don't need to ask for a lot of it. A lot of it's already given to you. And so I think just like in a lot of reservations, a lot of people feel really powerless. And so to know that that's always there, that there is that power there to like get whatever it is you need done. I don't know. It's just sorry, these aren't very succinct points.
No, absolutely. You know, and when we were doing the share out, the personal share outs, you know, that was kind of one of the things I said, you know, it's really empowering to yourself. And then when you're empowered, you empower your community. So thank you. That's great. I'm going to jump to Rebecca.
Yeah.
And
So oh yeah,
if I'm going too fast for you, Michelle, you just yell, slow down. I'm sorry for interrupting, Rebecca.
no, that's okay. I think defining or explaining tribal civics is really like you have to understand the history and how we got here to really, you know, be able to participate and be effective. So when I think about explaining tribal civics, it's more than just learning about government. It's learning about history and you know, all the events that led up to the systems that we're working in now.
That's great. Thank you. Couldn't agree more. And why is it important?
I think it's important. I mean, I think everybody else kind of covered it, but yeah, to be effective, we've got to understand our systems and how everything, you know, works together to produce an outcome.
That's good. Thank you. We're going to jump to Dan. Are you ready, Dan? Look at the first question.
Yeah, thanks. So, you know, I come at this from a perspective of someone who's not a member of a tribal community, but someone who really thinks civics is important. And I would define it as it's the understanding of your role as an individual in your community and how you can positively support it. And then also how all of the individuals come together and work together in order to move the community forward together in a positive, hopefully positive and constructive way. And so it's sort of all of the rules and structures around that are what people need to hopefully understand and work together on in order to move forward positively. And so that's how I sort of think. It makes me think about, you know, good citizens and the agreement about what makes a good citizen in a community. And, you know, as far as why I think it's important, I probably could go on and on for a long time. I certainly agree with understanding the history and how we arrived there, because that provides context. But I think of civics, especially an initiative like this, is it makes the unspoken spoken, because it explicitly defines these sort of shared agreements about behavior and citizenship amongst the community. And when you define that explicitly, that reduces stress and uncertainty for everyone in the community. It provides expectations that people can understand and be aware of. It provides opportunities for accountability. And, you know, for me, at the end of the day, civics is like, it's the designs on the fabric of culture, but it's also what binds it together. And if you don't have those, then you don't have this sort of shared agreement, and it's really unclear to everybody, but it makes it really clear. And I think that that's just so important for any community. And I think hopefully that matches for a tribal community as well.
Absolutely, Dan. Thank you so much for sharing. Bill, are you ready to share? There he is.
I think I already shared.
Oh, did you? Oh, I'm sorry.
But could I go back on the greens? You know, somehow I was thinking, and it came when Chris was talking, and I don't really know how to frame it, but like I think about like best practices, and somehow what she was talking about, somewhere I was thinking we need to kind of tie in best practices, because it seems like that's an important reason of why we're doing this. And I'm kind of like David right now. I'm not sure how to lay it out right now, but.
No, absolutely. That's a great addition. Thank you. And I knew I was calling on you for a reason. So you had that second thought. You were just signaling to me. I want to add to my answer. So we'll go to Kellen.
Kellen had to step out for a
Okay.
moment here in the education department. Sorry.
No, not a problem. Keely?
Yeah, so funny, my notes say pretty much the exact same thing as Rebecca's, but I just wrote down kind of like just the definition of actual just civics in general and the rights and duties of citizenship that leads back to who we are, where we came from, and why these laws are put into place from history. So just kind of leading off of what Rebecca says, it's those laws were put in place for a reason from history. Why did that happen? Why were these laws made? Where did they come from? So that's kind of what I put in adding to that. And then the second question, not only do I think it's like you're right as a member, but I kind of also see it as a responsibility to know our history, our rights, keeping it fresh and alive in everyone's memory, no matter what your age is. So I just kind of think of it as importance. It's kind of like a responsibility.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I think that I've called upon everyone. With that, what do you guys think? There's some differing viewpoints. No one is wrong. One of the things that I would like to comment on is just the diversity of the group and the diversity of the thought that we're having through this exercise. I think when you look at a tribal civics team, I really respect and applaud the makeup of this group, because there is no one right answer to what civics should look like, because your communities are diverse just as this group is diverse. And so by creating diverse thought and really sharing those discussions with your group, you're giving insight into something someone else might not have thought about, and really spurring the imagination of what your project can look like within your community that really touches all the bases. So I want to thank everyone for sharing, and I believe we are going to take a break. A health break, right, Michelle? How much time are we going to be able to allow these? Because we are a little over.
Yeah, we'll still give you guys the 15-minute health break, since we know we were working hard. So please just plan to return at 2:37. I'll throw that slide up so you know. I did a time reminder in the chat as well. But yeah, go ahead and please plan to return. We'll update the time on our slide here. But otherwise, yeah, go ahead and turn your cameras off, take a break, stretch, get a snack, finish your lunch, David, and we'll see y'all back in 15 minutes. All right, well, hopefully we can get folks back together. I know I gave you all an accidentally longer break, so if I don't see some cameras turn on, we may have an accidental extended break. But if you can hear me and you are ready to rejoin the session, we'll get your cameras back on, or if you would like to keep it off, you're totally okay to do so. Just pop a little reaction up or say hi back in the chat so we know that you are here. All right, I'm seeing a couple of faces come back on. Wonderful. Awesome, seeing some reactions. We've got some Zoom pros in here, I can tell. Okay. All right, well, we will go ahead and dive right back in, going into our overview of Leech Lake Civics. We'll be going over the origins of the Leech Lake Civics course, the course focus and content, looking at how an Anishinaabe worldview is reflected in the content and how participants engage in the course. We'll briefly talk about things that were considered when implementing the course and some of the impacts that have occurred on Leech Lake since civics was introduced. So starting with the origins of Leech Lake Civics. Leech Lake Civics was created by Levi Brown. Levi is from the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, as we saw in the video, and served as Leech Lake's environmental land director for 12 years. He's also a Native Nation rebuilder from cohort 9. Levi originally launched his civics course as part of his rebuilders program experience with NGC. He inspired us to create the Tribal Civics Guide and the course that you all are participating in. And in witnessing him create and implement a successful civics course for his own nation, we knew we needed to find a way to share his model with others in our region and beyond. Through the development of his course, Levi thoughtfully collaborated with other rebuilders, as well as spent over a year in his community learning from knowledge keepers and others to create resources to support the course. He observed the positive impacts his courses had on citizens of his nation, and resulted in increased understanding by his fellow citizens that all Anishinaabe have a role to play in their government. I once was a former employee of Leech Lake, and I've seen Levi's presentation several times. He truly is an engaging and energetic presenter that inspires pride in his nation. He also shares that you can see a lot of his journey reflected in the course content, as well as the community, because as he says, it is their story. So in the course, as you can see, he says the story begins with us. And you all have your own story. And through this summary of Leech Lake Civics, you'll be able to see how the Leech Lake story is reflected and think about how you might choose to tell the story of your own nation. One of the tools Levi uses to engage attendees is through a tool called Mentimeter. It creates a space to have community discussions around what might be difficult topics. So what we're actually going to do is take a chance to play with Mentimeter. So I'm going to drop the link in the chat here and have you go and vote. You can also go to this website here, www.menti.com, and type in code 51091051. So like I said, I dropped the link in the chat so you can follow that directly. And I'll go ahead and put this up here so that we can see as folks are voting. And so what you'll see is Mentimeter is a tool that you can vote or create word clouds in. So the question that's on the screen is the question that kicks off Leech Lake Civics. It's particularly interesting, as we'll discuss in a few minutes, because Leech Lake Civics is presented to new Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe tribal employees. So all new employees of the government. So starting with this question of, do you trust your government, was really a way to engage with these new employees, many of whom are tribal citizens as well. And as you can see, the results come in. These are anonymous as well, and it'll give us an average of the score. And so we have some folks saying like, oh, 2.5, we trust the BIA. Yes, strong agreement that we do trust the government. Some folks saying no. The answers are really less important as to why the questions are asked. When you're bringing everyone together and teaching the course, you're having community discussions so you can be realistic and honest about what you're looking at. Not wanting to knock the nation, but really identifying hurdles where we face and see the trust is much higher than kind of the lack of trust, which is really exciting to see. And again, thinking about the way that Leech Lake Civics is set up with new tribal employees, it's interesting to ask these questions in groups. In a lot of ways, it puts things in perspective for the assumptions that people make about the government, the community, and how we view ourselves, and how others view our nation. So head back into the slides now. Thank you all for sharing. All right, so in the final stage of being a rebuilder, Levi started thinking about what he needed to do to deepen the project's work within his nation. So what is civics at Leech Lake? Well, it's law. This is a screenshot of Tribal Resolution number 2019-61, the recognition and approval of Leech Lake Civics training. It institutionalizes Leech Lake Civics. Civics is housed in HR, and you're mandated to take this if you're an employee of the band. This also includes tribal council members, and the law states that explicitly. You may be able to see in this fourth point down, it says Leech Lake Civics is underrepresented and in most cases absent from all levels of educational institutions. This is not a statement you may hear very often and demonstrates one of the whys behind Leech Lake Civics and the need to institutionalize the course through law. Really wanting to step in and fill that role, knowing that the area education really isn't addressing Leech Lake Civics history. He also shares how civics shouldn't be political, about how it's their story and how that it's evolving. And so this is also noted in the resolution that the training is organic in nature and should be allowed to evolve with the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. So next we'll go ahead and look at the course focus. Again, following the theme of civics is telling our story. And what Levi often means by that is saying that each community, each nation has their own story, and you know your story. But it is important to have some of these basic frameworks, such as knowing how the government works. And one of the opportunities through civics is to create transparency about government actions and decision-making processes. As citizens may think that the government's not telling people about what's happening, that lack of knowledge can create space for falsehoods, things that we can see on Facebook and social media that can negatively impact the perception of the nation and the good work that's being accomplished. Through civics, we can have the space to have these conversations and understandings and can really help the citizens who make up the government, who make up your nation, connect and become a part of that government. So then when we ask that first question again about trust, right, it's not the BIA getting that score of a 2.3 and us getting kind of a higher 3 to 4, takes time. And we know it's not going to happen overnight to build those trusts for some nations' governments. But your hope is then that people start asking questions. Well, that's my civic duty, and I'm a citizen here. What should I or what can I be doing? And that becomes part of teaching civics in general. It's, the relationship that you have as a citizen and your government, and how the two don't exist without each other. So then with ownership in your government, it can tend to look a little differently. You may not rush to judgment, and you have power in deciding what to do with the knowledge that you learn. So then we look at everything that's going on. People have spoken about the feelings of powerlessness that may exist for our community members. So civics can come in with that understanding that you're a part of the government when you are a citizen, and that you have ownership and power in that. One of the things that is crucial to have is a worldview. You cannot have that. That's something that he really stresses in the course. And the shared worldview that he's identified for the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe is Minnow B'Mata. So that's one of the first prayers, and one of the things that's first given, and you'll see it in prayers and in buildings really all over. We've seen them down in Minneapolis and White Earth, Grand Portage, kind of all over Ojibwe country, and certainly all over Leech Lake. So Minnow B'Mata is that good life. It's the core value in that teaching, that when someone asks, do you want a good life for your kids? Do you want to pursue Minnow B'Mata? People will agree with that. And that worldview is grounding. It becomes a set of principles and way to guide, and something that people can agree on, and the common thread that brings us all together. So that worldview that's really Anishinaabe, and one that's ours. So then we can see these foci kind of trickle down into the course framework. The basic framework of Leech Lake Civics, again, begins with looking at how the government works and important historical events that have happened on Leech Lake, but through the telling of Leech Lake Nation's perspective, not the version that may have been told from a non-native perspective. They review some of the treaties, congressional acts, and historic events that have happened on Leech Lake. Through that Mentimeter tool, Levi's able to pull out the thoughts and feelings of participants to gauge where they're at. Because he's also a member of the community and grew up on Leech Lake, he often knows many of the family members of participants and isn't shy about calling them out, calling them in, and asking the stories of their experiences and of their families. He speaks again to that knowledge, how the lack of knowledge around government actions can create that space for those falsehoods and to bring those conversations to light. And again, he touches on civic duty and the understanding of the relationship between you and your government, and how relationship can lead to ownership and ultimately self-determination. Finally, he reviews why the government is doing what it's doing, knowing that this is just a snapshot in time, right? So we only know what we know today, and we can look back in history to think about how those historical events and decisions impact how our government operates today. And we can utilize those stories to think about how we want to tell the future. We can choose to plant positive seeds that will lead to a strong future and foundation for the nation and for our children. So then attendees can often identify the challenges experienced in the community, but Leech Lake Civics also provides a space to elevate their stories to improve pride in the nation. Throughout the course, Levi connects examples of individual impact and impact on the macro level. So the picture you can see here is of an elder, and it was taken at the NIGA conference in 2019. The woman in the middle here is Helen Bryan, and she is Bryan versus Itasca. So if you look at the federal Indian law case, that's her. All those years, Leech Lake never told the story of this elder living in a northern community on Leech Lake, and yet every attorney in federal Indian law knew who she was. She's the main character in a story of how a $143 tax bill turned into a $100 billion industry, which was gaming. Leech Lake had a hero right in their nation, and they didn't really share that story. So finally, when they did talk about it, when this story came up in civics, the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe gaming director told Ernie Stevens Jr., the executive director for NIGA, and they flew Helen to Connecticut. And then look, you can see her surrounded by these leaders and chiefs from Indian country, and they gave her a Lifetime Achievement Award. But it took 30 years to even acknowledge that she existed and that she was there, and the impact that she's really had both on Leech Lake and across Indian country. In 1976, she got that public defender and represented her all the way to the Supreme Court. Not only that, but she stayed engaged in her local Indian council and continued to serve on election boards until she walked on last year. So elevating these stories of our local heroes have really brought pride into the nation, and just really wonderful to be able to celebrate these stories in a way that hasn't been done before. Listed here are additional historical and ongoing political content that's covered in Leech Lake Civics. Of course, the treaties of 1855 and the Treaty of 1864, which established the Leech Lake Reservation and later expanded and consolidated the reservation in the area. Leech Lake is a nation that has a lot of water, which is important to speak about, and again ties to Levi's role right as the environmental land director. The history and impact of dams on Leech Lake and the ongoing relationship between the Army Corps of Engineers is also discussed. So pictured here, you can see the building of the Winnibigoshish Dam. In the 1880s, the U.S. government funded the construction of 2 dams, one on Lake Winnie and one on Leech River. Leech Lake actually was once the collection of 6 smaller lakes, but the construction of these dams caused the water levels to rise to a point that all 6 lakes became the one large lake now known as Leech Lake. This flooding, though, removed people from villages they had long occupied and destroyed their main subsistence activities of fishing, ricing, and harvesting. It was only in 1985 the U.S. government ultimately offered a one-time payment to the band to account for tribal land taken the nearly century before, and the loss of the wild rice, berries, and maple trees that are now underwater. The other photo here we can see is of Representative Leroy Staple Fairbanks and the 12,000 acres that were wrongfully taken from the band in the 40s and 50s that have now been restored. Leech Lake shares more than 2,000 miles of boundary with the Chippewa National Forest, and nearly 40% of that forest lies within Leech Lake tribal lands. Levi really speaks to the power of the local Indian councils within each of the communities on Leech Lake, and the power that they have to dictate the relationship with those 2 entities and the decisions made by the Chippewa National Forest that citizens may not even be aware of. And then, again, reminding folks of the opportunity that they have to engage in the governance of their nation through participation in those local Indian councils. He also shares numerous stories of assertion of fishing and hunting rights and of ricing rights, and covers historic moments such as the Battle of Sugar Point, which now has become an official Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe holiday, with programming and events offered to educate the community about the nation's history and leaders. So just in these few slides, you can really see the impact of these civics courses and the knowledge that's shared and how that's trickled out into other community programming and recognition for our leaders in the nation. So one of the responses we get through Mentimeter and that Levi's been able to hear from these participants in his civics courses is feedback, right? That's something that we always want to hear when we offer a presentation. But a band member once asked, why do I need to learn this? I'm not trying to be George Washington. And these questions can come up in community, and we need to have space to have these conversations. Levi found again that he really had to address that role of the government and have participants reflect on this and see the evolution of the Leech Lake governing practices, which demonstrate an opportunity to evolve in the future. How can we be mindful about how we want our government to look in the future? How can we be mindful about our experiences with other local, state, and federal governments based on our history? Again, speaking to what you all have noticed and pointed out, that you really need to know your historic events and relationships to demonstrate and move the impact forward for the future. Again, in civics, they look at how and why do we govern in the past, knowing that we had a traditional clan system that governed Anishinaabeg people. Taking the time to educate and analyze that these frameworks are available as part of why we need to have these conversations. And they provide opportunities to ask questions that may not really be answered. So again, historically, federal governments and schools have come in to teach our histories, but they're telling their perspective. So this is a chance to tell ours. This is another chance to speak to cultural ties in your governance. The government is a reflection of the people, and this can bring in that shared worldview of Minot B'Madaziwan that Levi identified for Leech Lake, which is again at the base, and everything you want to do be tied back to that. And through civics is an opportunity to actually apply Minot B'Madaziwan, to live and to work in a way that makes us feel good. So folks have asked, like, well, what do cultural ties really look like? Can look as simple as something like, okay, if Joe's my cousin, Joe can bring me his deer tag and I can go and fill it. And that's something that can be written into law through the governance, our cultural ties, that can really allow for harvesting. Again, I bring up that example again, knowing like Levi is an environmental land director, and that is a question that came up and something that he was able to tie into policy and law. And as a way of being a good relative, right? We talked about that in the beginning of knowing that we want to live in a good way, and that we can work within the system together. So you can see that taking ownership of the past, of our history, and the historic component is important to knowing your story. There are things that have been done to our communities that have changed, how we think about the government and the role that government can and does play. It's important to think about so we can talk and move forward in a good way into a future that we all want. All right, so we're going to hop back into Mentimeter again. So again, you can either, go to the website, or I'll go ahead and you can click the link again in the chat box, and I will go ahead and pull the presenting up. Okay, so this is another question that's pulled straight from Leech Lake Civics. Your votes are anonymous, and this is a question, again, to gauge like what folks think the purpose of the government is. And you can rank how high you agree or disagree with the question. So what is the purpose of Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux community's government? You can rank if you agree or disagree to give out money, to establish laws and social programs, to ensure justice for all. I don't know if folks are able to get into this one. Let's see. Very cool. Awesome. Yeah, okay. Very cool.
I know while everyone's voting, Michelle, going back to that first question, when it talked about the government, were you talking about the federal government?
Oh, my apologies for that. Well, I suppose you could go either way, but initially, like pulling these questions right from the Leech Lake Civics presentation, that was about Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux government.
Okay, good. And that's kind of what I thought. So, and then I know while we're waiting for people to do this, for those people that are looking on the screen and you see Michelle, it's sort of weird how her head kind of, those little whatever your star quilt is in the back, they look like they're poking out of your head. So
they do. I may need to adjust where my quilt is at.
She looks like the Statue of Liberty, right? That's what you're thinking.
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say. The native Statue of Liberty. It's perfect.
Oh, so much more beautiful.
I don't know about that, but
sorry, I had to point that out.
No, that's great. I had not really noticed that, and now I'm thinking I may need to move my quilt to another wall.
No, I think you should keep it.
We're making observations. Michelle, I think you should narrate audiobooks because you've got a perfect voice for that.
Wow, thank you. Might need to look into that side hustle. All right, well, thank you. And again, like the questions that we're sharing here through Menti really are just ways to kind of engage folks through the presentation. We've got one more that you can think about. And again, like these are questions that are asked explicitly to new Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe employees. So asking this question is also interesting of, does the government need the people? yeah, it's just really great to like engage folks and have them think about it, because sometimes people may have an underlying assumption that yes or no, depending on their experience, but without creating the space to reflect and to ask folks, we may not know where they're actually at. So it's just a really fun and useful tool to bring folks into the space. I'll go ahead and thank you all for getting into that. And as I hope you can see, it's really easy to use as well. So, all right, we'll go. And so here are some of the results that you can see over time that Leech Lake Civics has seen through their Mentimeter polls. I mean, you can see some sessions, have different voting results than others, but on the bottom here, you can see the dates of each of the workshops. So Levi doesn't do any kind of formal surveys, but he utilizes the Mentimeter tool in order to gain feedback. So folks can also do kind of comments throughout the presentation, as you can see, like the little comment bubble here, and a way to gauge again and share back with council. So he ultimately, after each workshop, will do a report back to the tribal council, just summarizing the results and the participants that attended. And HR also reports on the number of employees trained at their quarterly report. So it's really cool to just share out that information and see the impact in that way. I'll go ahead and slide right on. One of the other resources that Levi uses when talking about the past and future of Leech Lake governance practices is something he learned as a rebuilder. The Harvard Project on American Indian Economic Development study identified 5 main principles that were demonstrated in Native nations that had successful and strong economic development. So these are the principles that you see on the screen: spirited leadership, capable governing institutions, strategic orientation, cultural match, and sovereignty. So he utilizes these as a framework to talk about the progress that's happening at Leech Lake. So examples of transformational leadership through a Native nation rebuilding approach is leaders serving as visionaries, change makers, and mobilizers who recognize the need for fundamental change and who can engage with their community to make change happen. Native nation rebuilders have strong governing institutions where laws and policies are effective, clear, and fair. And there's a tendency to want to really have a firm foundation of governance that will enable successful long-term businesses and initiatives to thrive. These nations use 7th generation thinking, where decision-making is strategic and long-term, and Native nations approach development as a means to build a society that works instead of just a quick fix for poverty. We understand the realities of needing to be responsive in your crisis in your communities. This principle isn't saying to ignore those issues as they come up, but more about challenging you to think about what the root cause of the issue is. And if there's a program, initiative, or protocol that could be used in place to be activated when this crisis happens. He also speaks about cultural match and having systems that reflect Indigenous cultures and values. Institutions can build and innovate governing responsibilities with Indigenous concepts. So this also means looking at all your systems, projects, and plans to find ways to integrate Indigenous cultural values and practices to guide the process. It doesn't always mean going back to how we governed right in the 1300s, but it does mean indigenously generated solutions to governance challenges and responding indigenously to current Indigenous conditions. Finally, thinking about wielding sovereignty, Native nations design and control their own future and assert their self-governing power, which increases their chances of sustainable development. With that being said, there are times when it's beneficial to work with colonial governments, and in those instances, Native nations flex their sovereignty to work as equal partners informed by their citizens and their interests. Can be kind of mind-blowing to shift into this nation-building approach just because of the legacy of policies that have forced us into the standard approach. It's important to keep in mind always that there's no shame or judgment in having aspects of tribal government that fall more in the standard approach than the Native nation rebuilding approach. And Levi really speaks to how rebuilding and re-indigenizing is a long and hard process, but it has to begin with recognizing where to start and knowing our story. So he goes into examples of each of those principles. And so I just included a few here, looking at, strong governing institutions, utilizing Minopemadaziwin as that Native nation building approach. So the institutions being fair and stable and legitimate in the eyes of the people, and how Leech Lake has exemplified that and compares it to a standard approach that may have existed in the community prior to really implementing Minopemadaziwin, right? So thinking about using power to increase personal holdings, or asking other governments permission to do what's in the best interest of the community, and always with the goal to move towards Minot-Bumataziwin, to move towards kind of Leech Lake rebuilding. So another example of that is how Leech Lake has utilized and grown in sovereignty. And so looking at Minot-Bumataziwin, with the tribal government having the resources and capabilities to make its own decisions, and thinking about that relationship with the Chippewa National Forest. See here, Leech Lake has really changed their relationship that they had since the 40s and 50s with the stealing of the land, and now building a relationship so that tribal members can access the Chippewa National Forest with free camping and other joint agreements. And then being viewed as an equal by other governments and focus on programming sustainability, and thinking about how that really is different from that standard approach that may have been utilized in the past. All right, well, thinking back to then, like, we've got our attendees who've increased their knowledge and pride in this history of Leech Lake. They've thought about how their government operates, and they've learned about the Rebuilding Native Nations framework and how that is a tool that can be used to move Leech Lake forward. Then comes the question of, can 5 council members really change all of this? So these are a list of issues and priorities tied to Leech Lake that Levi brings up, and this doesn't even include COVID. So this question's then posed to brand new tribal employees. I forgot to mention that 75% of the new employees are typically band members. So these are, citizens of the nation that are impacted and that have a say, or could have a say in these issues in their community. So when this question comes up, can council members address all of these issues? Often the responses that participants will have is no, like, why would you think that? There's so much. And the general mindset that comes, though, with elections is that we want our council to take care of all of these items. But that provides the opportunity then to pause and ask, well, if you think that, then you can realize that you have a role in fixing and addressing these shared challenges in our community. Little changes can happen in our interpersonal relationships, and tribal civics is really an opportunity to take people's mindsets and open the door to have conversations, to engage with your citizens and community members so they can see the impact that you can have and how you want to create positive change in your community. So getting now down into kind of the nitty-gritty of things to consider when implementing from the Leech Lake Civics course. Obviously important to think about who's delivering the course, especially when thinking about the historic events and historical trauma that can accompany that. Levi grew up on Leech Lake and worked for the band for 12 years, as I mentioned, and didn't begin to write the course until after he ceased his employment with Leech Lake. He also doesn't have a contract with Leech Lake and does the trainings, he says, because it's something that he believes he has the civic obligation to do. So he believes it's his way to give back, which then alleviates some of the pressure and kind of addresses some of those questions where people want to challenge maybe the intent and meaning behind the course. He jokes that he's not an employee of Leech Lake, and so they can't fire him. It also just helps to really think about how they wrote this course into law. So, right, like tribal council really believed that this is important for all the citizens to know. And so that can also help wash away some of the distrust that may exist. In terms of participants, again, the targeted audience is new band employees and tribal council members. They found that a majority of the band employees are band members. So it's an accessible way for them to reach their citizens. The presentation is a 4.5-hour course, which is a lot, once a month, but it was really, again, a recurring and easy way to connect with folks. And the materials are all slides engaged through Mentimeter, and then a PDF booklet that we will send out to you all. The location is also interesting to think about when delivering your civics course, can impact how it's viewed, right? So Leech Lake houses the course in HR and hosts it in the HR training room. But this is also interesting because the building HR is located in used to be the BIA building. So Levi also speaks to this history in the presentation, which is notable since he remembers and hears the stories from when he was younger and from elders about the stories and emotions that can come from that building, right? Where annuities may have been handed out, relations with the BIA have been there, and how different that is now that the facility center is operated and many of the tribal offices work out of there rather than the BIA. But it's just an example of how the nation can evolve, and is something, again, important to think about when delivering the course. Council originally wanted the course to run at the Leech Lake Tribal College, but found that HR ultimately was the best decision since they are front and center with every employee. Finally, again, just speaking to that importance of binding law and why the approach of relying on area educational institutions to share their story wasn't working. Future generations can now see why they made the decision and help to grow the story into the future. So in seeing the impact of Leech Lake Civics, 698 government staff have been trained since it was first implemented. 22 gaming directors have been trained, and the Leech Lake Tribal College staff and Cass Lake Bena High School staff have been trained. A course has also been done with high schoolers at Buganagishik School and Cass Lake Bena. And there are plans to develop a gaming specific course with a bigger emphasis on gaming law. There's also discussions around building a tribal college civics course and train the trainer, since Levi still is the only person delivering the Leech Lake Civics course. And he, connects with our organization as well. And so the need to expand is definitely there. And so within a year, you have this flyer up here of Leech Lake Days. So he began the civics course, and within a year, the band began to have Leech Lake Days. Levi says they didn't have that growing up, and there wasn't this sense of pride in being a Leech Laker. And I will say, like, the t-shirts that come out for Leech Lake Days every year are coveted. And they say things like, proud to be a Leech Laker, exercising my treaty rights with artwork of the 1855 treaty, and just really cool graphics that are done by local artists that elevate the pride again for Leech Lake Nation. As the course continues to evolve over time, and one of the things that can be shared too is also, like, as Anishinaabe, we know we're not perfect and we'll make mistakes, but the long side of tribal civics is that the majority of your nation, the citizens in your nation, want Minnow Bimadaziwan and want a better life, and that we can provide a vantage point to have these conversations. It's an opportunity to get there and see how your citizens can have their own individual impact in the government, and take that 7th generation viewpoint, and that we may not see the fruits of it today, but can plant the seeds so that the future can grow strong and rooted deeply with pride in their nation. Okay, I just gave a lot of content. So now we're going to go into some brainstorming. We will go ahead and set up a pair share for folks. So I will go ahead and start doing some teams so that you can have some time to reflect on all the content that just was covered. And so if you give me 1 second, I'll get these rooms assigned. Here we go. Okay. Let's see here. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, and so you should be seeing an invitation shortly. And if you have trouble getting into your room, just let me know. But otherwise, I'm going to open all the rooms, and we'll have you take 5 minutes to brainstorm with the questions that are listed here. And I'll put them in the chat as well, since you won't be able to see the screen. And when we return, we'll have everyone share out their thoughts in the large group. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms.
Carissa wanted to escape the breakout room.
Was she in there with you?
Yeah, we did deal with.
Well, I don't blame
I was gonna
her.
say, why?
Not an escape room, it's a
escape room.
I was with the clown, guys. Come on.
Oh, good point.
Hey, did our questions didn't show up in the chat, so
Ooh.
we need another 5 minutes.
Well, would you be comfortable sharing out in the group and having a large group discussion instead?
Yeah, that'll work.
All right. Well, would you like to kick us off, Bill, and share any
Yes.
reflections or thoughts you had?
Yes, I would like to turn it over to Carissa.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate that. Reflections and thoughts. We really like the just how you went over the standard approach versus the tribal rebuilding, I believe it was called, approach. Reflections or thoughts, Bill. I don't know why you left me have this.
I'll help you with question 2.
Okay. Thoughts we had. I'm drawing a blank.
Okay, so we'll jump to question 2. Identify
Yeah.
2 questions that you have for Michelle about the course. I guess the one is like, I'm kind of curious on the makeup of the course, like how long did it really take to put something like this together? And then I know that there's a visual nature of how people like to see things versus like written, and just kind of curious on kind of the content that the employees would get from the course, and what was available like through the presentations.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we will have Levi on a workshop 4 to speak about sustainability, but we can also be sure to bring some of those questions to him. What he shared is that it took a little over a year to develop the original form of Leech Lake Civics. And again, that's because it was a part of our Native Nations rebuilding program. And so each of the rebuilders has a project that they work on for that year. And so from there, that's where the course was developed. As I mentioned, things are integrated over time, new lessons and new ways of looking back on policies and practices. So it does get updated. And in terms of kind of the delivery, so that is interesting. He's a really engaging presenter in person. I'm sure when he comes in workshop 4, he'll do another push to really want to have in-person things. And so just as a presenter himself, he's really engaging, and the session is held in person. He utilizes just the slide deck through Mentimeter, so you can build slideshows within that Mentimeter tool. That PDF of Leech Lake Civics is relatively new, and so I'm not sure when that was developed, and that's a question that we can bring to him, and how the content for that specific PDF was decided, and how that's disseminated, because that actually isn't given out to employees during the workshop. So really, truly, it just is Levi presenting in the HR training room.
I think another question we had, Bill and I did, a lot of us spoke about the youth and getting the youth involved with this course as well. And just basically how is the civics course, is it just for adults mainly in Leech Lake? Is it for the youth, or how is there a little combination of both, or how does that look like up there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the course really is targeted towards adults. So it's for the band employees. And so, typically 18 and up. He has done the 2 sessions with the area schools, and I'm not totally sure what the content of that looks like. And I know this kind of like youth civics is something that has been requested around Leech Lake. And as I mentioned, kind of like something to think about in developing for the future. So maybe that's another question we can bring to him, knowing that that is a specific priority for your group, to think about what his thoughts are on that and kind of where he is in progress in terms of developing that. It's really wonderful that you all have a team as well. I think that's been one of the challenges that he identified, is that he has done this primarily as a solo individual, and that has limited the capacity. Any other reflections? Let's see if I call another group.
I can jump in. So my group was Mary and Lisa, and we just talked a little bit about how like Leech Lake really seemed to embrace this this course, essentially, all the way from the citizens, the employees, to the tribal council even kind of issuing a resolution. So how do we, I guess, like, how did he build up that buy-in as he was working his way through the course?
That is a great question. And so I think it's part of, like, as he was kind of wrapping up his experience in the Rebuilders program, and kind of shopped the course around in a way. So he originally presented it at the tribal college with the thought that maybe it could be there, without council's nudging originally, just brought it there and presented to the tribal college staff and faculty and administrators to think about how that would fit. And so, right, it's not a semester-long course. It's like a kind of a one-time community education component. And so I think there was really that opportunity to kind of deliver it around to different stakeholders in the community and to identify where it would best fit. And again, that's another conversation that we can bring to him too, is that journey of where and how did he really find it to fit best there, and then how might it evolve, right? Because Leech Lake Civics as a college course at the tribal college could look much different. If there was a cultural center on Leech Lake, right, like a museum opportunity, similar to what you all have, the course content and dissemination could also look different. And so I think that also, like, the setup of the course, it being that one session, also helped determine where it would fit best for the nation.
And I guess the other thing too is this course is primarily delivered to Leech Lake employees, which are, I think you said someplace around 70% band members. Here at SMSC, the majority of our employees are not SMSC members. So, you know, thinking about where to house this, and I'm asking this to the whole group too, is this something we would want to see our employees go through as part of the orientation, in addition to developing it for our community members? And do those look the same, or do they look different? And then to Chris's point, is there, you know, a youth version as we kind of build this foundation of this course? Then, you know, how do we utilize it or tweak it for the different audiences we may want to utilize it for?
Rebecca, I think you answered the question right there about like tweaking it for the different audience. You know, I mean, I think, you know, the focus would be on the tribal members, you know, and as Chris has said, versions for based on your age or whatever. But I think it would be important for, you know, the government employees to have something, and maybe a different version for the casino employees.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I did have a couple questions. Well, one comment, as somebody who volunteers a lot of their time in the tribe, like, I really like his point that they can't fire him, because I say that a lot. But one of my questions was, how is engagement up there? I know that's always a problem down here, is like, I think a lot of this stuff is important, but engagement is always low. And then also the interest and understanding of tribal law, because I mean, I've had discussions with Becca where I'm like 37 and I'm just hearing about whatever that one trilogy was that was like the basis of so much of tribal law. I can't even remember what it is, and it's really important, you know what I mean?
The Marshall trilogy, and I think that's something we should definitely include in this, because it's part of how we got to where we are today, right?
Yes, these are great questions and great, like, yes, things to think about as you all develop your course. So, I mean, the engagement, one of the things with like it being tied to HR is that like HR will track you down and they keep track of it. And so there's definitely like accountability measures that can be put in place around like follow up with your manager to get folks into their civics training, and so that they like complete it, because folks do like get a certificate of completion that then goes into their employee file. In terms of the understanding of tribal law, that's interesting. And I think Levi may need to be the one to go a little deeper into like how he chose like what level of like historical events, tribal laws, treaties, like how deep he chose to go into that, and like the decisions that came around that process, because I think you're right, they are so critical. But like, how are you engaging folks and then meeting them where they're at? Because some people haven't heard like these stories of their home, like, you know, knowing the history of the dams on Leech Lake is really important, but not something that everybody, you know, knows, and can really like impact how you view your home and increase that pride in your nation. So there are a lot of things that can like be really emotional when sharing the stories of where we come from, that are really hard. And so making sure that you're creating the space to both feel those emotions and also get into that deep nitty-gritty, because we do need to know about these things. Yeah. Right. Any other reflections, thoughts, or questions? I am taking notes also as you guys are kind of sharing these questions out, and we'll be sure to pass them along so that Levi can make sure to include these in his presentation when he joins us in June. And you certainly will have opportunity then as well to, as you've gone through the training too at Civics, to get into how you want to implement and hear his thoughts around that as well.
Michelle, this is how many tribes have you walked through this exercise now?
You are our second.
Okay. So the first one that you did, do they have a final product yet?
No, so we have our action planning workshop with them this summer to really like lift everything off the ground. And so we go through these series of workshops covering the content, and then we'll do kind of a follow-up, like really strong working session where we then flesh out all of the details. So you'll create the outline kind of your plan at the end of these workshops, and then we'll plan to schedule really like 4-hour day working sessions where you will then dive deep into focusing on who your target audience will be, what content do you think would apply to them, where you want to host it, what the time will look like. So this summer, that's what we'll be doing. We first worked with folks from Turtle Mountain. So we had a really great time with their Tribal Civics group, and we're excited to see what they come up with.
Yeah, I'd just be curious after you do that, kind of what, the reflections on that and that process.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I do want to be mindful. We wanted to give you one more health break before we kind of head out or head into our final closing activity. So take another break. All right. We'll have folks come on back. I know that was a quick break, but we are in the home stretch, the workshop. So if you want to either turn your cameras back on, give us a reaction emoji or thumbs up in the chat. Oh, virtual thumbs or real thumbs up. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to pass it over to Joe now for a visioning exercise.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, now this is the funnest part of the whole workshop today. You have an opportunity to reflect. You've had an opportunity to look at Leech Lake and some of the work that they've done, some of the thinking behind the development of their project. And so what we want you to do is we want you to imagine that you've created and implemented a Tribal Civics project for your nation and for your citizens. So you've just completed the first session. You've had a great turnout, and the engagement was just off the charts. So what do you see, hear, observe, taste, smell, etc.? And so we want you just to take 5 minutes and just kind of jot this down, thinking about why that, the Tribal Civics Project is important to you and the type of change or impact you'd like to have within your communities as really to guide you. So we'll do 5 minutes and we will come back and do a brief share.
Change is a choice and it can start with me. And change is a choice and it can start with me. And change is a choice and it can start with you.
Okay, is there anyone that wants to share real quickly before we get into the next part of the group discussion? I know that was a little quicker than 5 minutes, Michelle. The music caught me off guard. I don't have a timer on my end.
Sure, I'll go.
Okay, thanks, David.
I wrote, sorry, I'm not great at reading. Let me start over. I feel relieved and invigorated that there are so many other curious members ready, willing, and able to start asking what the possibilities of our sovereignty are. The room is buzzing with communal story sharing and inquisitive nature.
That's great. Thank you, David. Okay, now we're going to move on to the next slide, Michelle, and we're going to get into a group discussion. We have 4 questions that we really want everyone to reflect on and kind of think about, the vision exercise you just participated in. And we are going to have you answer these questions. And we'll start with the first one. And please feel free to jump in if you're ready to answer. So the first question is, why is right now the time to implement a tribal civics initiative? As you can see, David, I'm not very good at reading either. So would anyone like to jump in?
Sure. I mean, I think this is something we should have done a long time ago. So I think, now is better than never. There probably is never a perfect time either.
I feel like we're seeing a lot of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just thanking Rebecca. Please continue, Mary.
I feel like we're seeing, recently in the last several months, a lot of interest in government and, people wanting to understand how the government functions. So I think, I think the timing is good.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we could maybe move on to the next question. What do I hope to gain from this experience? And then if someone wants to answer the first question, we can always jump back to it. So what do I hope to gain from this experience?
I personally, I can't wait to hear some stories. I mean, I know I've got stories from my family about, when bingo started and kind of, my grandfather's perspective, but I know Carissa and David have, stories from their family. And I think as we reach out and, start to ask people what should be included, I am just really excited to learn more about my community from different family and community perspectives.
Well, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback off of that, what you guys were showing about Leech Lake, Keely and I were in a session, she was like, how did they not tell that story for 30 years? And that makes me think that there's probably some of that here. And I'm like, yeah, there's definitely some stuff like that on all of our nations, so.
It's great. Thank you. Anyone else? Mary, you want to jump in on this one?
I guess I would agree. I mean, I just think, I want to hear, I want to hear what people are interested in. I want to hear, what is going to motivate people to become interested. And I still really, I look to, getting the youth, brought into the process sooner than later as well.
Thank you.
Joe, I'd like to go back to the first question.
Okay. Michelle's really good at navigating this.
Oh, okay. Oh, is it Michelle that's doing that?
Oh, absolutely. She's a wizard behind the scenes, guys.
Why is it the right now the time to implement this? So my thought on this is that we need to ensure that we have a fully informed membership, as at some point we need to look at maybe a constitutional revision to the tribal constitution. So the more that our members are informed, the better they would be to be on some sort of committee or work group to look at our Constitution.
Wow, that's some really deep thinking, Bill, and constitutional reform and really the role of civics and the role civics plays in a process like that, can't be understated. If your people are informed, they're going to be active participants, and they're going to really help shape what the vision of your community could look like through constitutional reform. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
If anyone else wants to weigh in on these two questions,
I'll
Krista?
jump in. Why is the right time now? So I've been working, today is actually my 2nd year anniversary working here at the Cultural Center. Woo! So when I first started working here, there was a lack of engagement, and from previous to now, the engagement that I've seen has grown significantly. So I feel like a lot of people, oh, my light shut off. Okay. So COVID really pushed everybody into their houses, and now people are really just wanting to be a part of something bigger. That's what I'm seeing. So I think that's a huge part of it. COVID really taught people like, hey, your community is always going to be here. So now is the time to really act and get involved with that, I think. I can't.
Oh, that's great. I never really thought about isolation and really, how it would really push people towards community and how you would see that impact within your work. So that's great.
Yeah. And then what do I hope to gain from this experience? Personally, a lot of the stories going back from when I was a kid to now, a lot of our members don't have those stories, or they don't remember them. Times were a lot different than they were now. So I feel like getting those stories out to our members and just sharing a little bit more than what we do share. We don't have the time to share sometimes. So that's the huge issue sometimes. So just getting the word out. So I think, yeah, I can't words.
Yeah, I hear you. Thank you so much for that comment. We will move on to question 3. What is the potential impact of a learning experience like this for my nation or community?
I think there's a lot of healing there, I mean, when you look at a lot of like what we're taught, we're not taught any of these things that really affect our daily lives in Indian country, and it's kind of a shame. So I think really kind of taking that sort of initiative and showing us all that we have a lot more say than they'd like us to believe is a really healing aspect.
Absolutely. Anyone else want to weigh in on that question?
I hope that this experience, has a positive impact on our meetings, our ability to, have productive conversations with each other. And I think, having these conversations about history and telling stories and, to David's point about healing, I think, all those things provide a level of calm and a base that, I think will make our discussions, whether it's work groups or general council meetings, a little more productive and provide some better perspective.
Thank you, Rebecca. Anyone else want to share on that question or the next question?
I think I might kind of jumble a little bit through all 3 of these questions in a sense, just like a lot of thoughts in my head from kind of piggybacking off of people. I think a good for people like someone like me who's had a tough time learning in school just with kind of like more of a learning disability, what's a good way to keep people engaged in learning about civics? And I think that those stories do really help with that, because when we were going through that course with Leech Lake, as David and I were saying, that kind of those stories of their elders there and what they had to tell us kept me engaged. Like, oh, that was very interesting. So I think that's something that can really help with creating a really successful course for our community. And also that will kind of, if the youth can participate in the civics group more, I think it'll kind of show a little bit more of respect to our elders, showing the youth that, hey, we do care. We're grateful for this is why, like, you know, you guys are the reason why we are here today. And our elders are only going to be here with us for so long. So having those stories while they're still, some of them are even here with us still, like even my grandma learning about certain things like that. I think that really helps bring the community together more. Like Rebecca, what you were saying with our meetings and stuff, I think that could really help circle everyone back together, because there is that divide of age and people don't really realize where they came from, why we're here, and what it took to get here. That's kind of just my thoughts.
No, absolutely. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Anyone else? Oh, Bill.
I think they kind of hit it. I liked all of the comments, so nothing more to add.
Okay, then we'll jump into the final question. Is there anyone else within your community that you think that should be a part of the Tribal Civics team?
Yes. We have a whole list of people that we'd like to invite. And actually, I think you recorded this whole session. So I would like to maybe take this session recording, and Carissa has a list of people we identified, and maybe have them watch it and get caught up, so that we can invite them to participate in future sessions. Don't you think, Carissa?
Yeah, I have the list. I just don't have contact info for that. So maybe Mary or Bill or Rebecca even could help with that. I can send over what I have.
Yep, I can help you with that, Carissa.
Cool.
Okay, so when we're thinking about that, beyond just sharing the video, are there specific groups that you think there would be value? Maybe people who are influential in certain sectors within your community, maybe just by group. You know, we talked about gaming, and we talked about, you know, tribal leadership. You know, is there anyone else that maybe isn't represented within your team that you could see that could be valuable? Maybe not an individual, but maybe just participation from a sector that's necessary to make this successful.
Yeah, I mean, definitely some of our elders in the community who can, you know, share some of those stories or point us in the direction of people we should be talking to, I think would be good.
I think people from Mary's team from the archives would be very important to have as well, because they know a lot of these documents and where these documents are, and are they housed wherever. But I think her team is really influential in this whole group as well.
Yep, I agree.
Go ahead, Mary, I'm sorry.
Oh, I just said I agree. We've got a tribal archivist that would be, I think, really beneficial.
Okay. Now looking at who you've kind of discussed, is there anyone else that's missing that you'd like to involve, really support the work?
I mean, I'd really like to get the youth involved, but engagement's always difficult. And I guess one of the questions I have on that is, if they were involved in that, is there any way this can be like work towards a school credit for them yet, or is it not quite there?
Those were some of the things that I know members within Turtle Mountain were talking about, offering CEUs and different other opportunities are really incorporated into some type of, you know, 9-week program or course. I mean, So, you know, it's really up to your imagination. What do you think is valuable or could be or is, would look valuable to your community or the people that you really want to touch? You know, if you're looking at your youth and really passing on that insight and that wisdom from your tribal leadership to really help define your community through all of your efforts, you know, anyone or anything that you think in designing your project, you know, so yours isn't going to look exactly like Leech Lake's, but it's not supposed to. It's supposed to be defined by you and really differentiated by, you know, your cultural match and your vision, you know, for your community. And there might not be the same issues that are happening within Leech Lake that are happening in your area. So you know, just definitely keep that in mind and tailor it to meet the needs of your community and where you can provide the most valuable. If youth is a sector, you know, I would definitely investigate, you know, ways to really tap into the youth to either get their participation or maybe even target them, you know, through your project at the end of this. Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry, David.
Oh, I was just saying thank you.
Okay, I think that we will be moving on to closing and next steps, and that is Michelle.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for all that you shared. And you will actually, like the conversations that were generated today, we'll see, you know, help prepare for the next workshop and our future conversations as well. So just going over some closing thoughts. After every workshop, we will provide you with these Nourish Your Mind resources. We like to call it that instead of homework. They really do help you set kind of the framework for our next workshop, so you know what it will be focused on, and finding resources and different topics you'd like to cover. So we'd like you to read pages 14 through 19 of the Tribal Civics Guidebook, and page 29 as well. We would also like to have you all sign up on the Open in a Good Way Jamboard sheet. I will drop that in the chat 1 second. And so, yeah, kind of how we opened up today with really wonderful words from Rebecca, but that can be interpreted however you would like. I think in some other workshops, we've had folks offer a song, play a short video, a mindful meditation. So if you want to think about that, we would love to have someone from your team open in a good way, knowing that it's an important part of holding space in our communities. And it's taking a healthy risk and practicing this important community role. So if you would like to sign up for that, you can select a sticky note here, write your name on it, and put it on the workshop that you would like to open in a good way. We will assign dates on March 10th if there are not enough folks to sign up. All right, so then next we would love to hear your thoughts on the reflection Jamboard to these 2 prompts before our next session. So you can see, I'll do a copy here, drop that in the chat as well. So that you can reflect on these things before our next session. So you can see that it's due March 15th. And have folks think about, again, why right now is the right time for tribal civics. And some of the things you already talked about and generated today. So who in our community has the knowledge or skills that they would be willing to share with the tribal civics team? And do any of these folks need to be added to these planning teams to attend these calls? Or will they be a part of your separate work outside of the session? So just something to think about. Again, you all generated a lot of great work in our last group discussion. So just something else to keep us engaged as you are between workshops. All right, so between now and the next workshop, again, try and complete as much of the following. If there are additional folks that you would like invited to these calls, go ahead and let me know, or feel free to send out the calendar invitations that you have, or forward the email that I'll send prior to the workshops that include the Zoom links. We definitely encourage you all to meet, debrief, share additional ideas that you have for your initiative, and identify any questions that may have come up for the team. And we can also review community resources that can be used in your initiatives. So we identified some of these just in our kind of general searches. Of course, your beautiful cultural center. Okay, and I'm going to work on my Dakota. I was telling Joe this. So the Ho-Cho-Ka-Ta-Ti. I'm sure you're all familiar with this. Carissa seems like the expert there, especially in increasing engagement. That's amazing to hear. So again, utilizing this as a resource to think about content. As someone who is a language learner of Anishinaabe, love to see language resources. And so that's another resource that we found available for you. And again, yeah, things that you sound like have already identified. So another one, practicing my Dakota, the Dakota Wichohan organization. We thought their leadership and Lifeway programs were really cool, and thinking about other community leaders in the region that do outreach, particularly around curriculum and teacher training. We're also really inspired by the documentary that they had on Dakota language. And then another cool resource that we found about was the Mokoche Ikikuchipi. Again, my apologies for my Dakota, but another really cool organization that we saw just doing really restorative and reparative justice work on Dakota land. So you all have already generated great ideas, and so we look forward to kind of hearing what you all come up with in the future workshops, and just know like there are great resources available, and if we can provide any support in the research or connection to any of these organizations, please let us know. Again, as you've all shared, you're also, many of you are educators in the community. So if you could just take some time over the next 2 weeks to think about who you'd like to connect and engage with, what content you would like to deliver, that will help us as we're doing our community resource mapping. Again, to identify where we'll find some of that information and bring the team together. All right, one more thing that's really important to us as we host these workshops is to get your feedback so that we can improve our delivery. So I'm going to go ahead and throw our survey link in the chat. If you could just take a couple of minutes to fill out this survey for us. This allows us to make adjustments in real time. So if there's something that you would like to see different in the next workshop, we can go ahead and do our best to provide that to you in the next few weeks. I was muted. All right. Thank you everyone for taking the time to do that survey. If you haven't quite finished it yet, that's all right. You can go ahead and just leave that tab up. You can get back to it. So we'll go ahead and get forward. So to give you an idea of what we'll be focusing on next time in our gathering information workshop, like we said, we will identify goals that you'd like to work through in your civics team, some topics that you'd like to include based on the participants that you are hoping to target. So I think that's great. We've already provided a wide variety of audiences. So then we want to think about what content to include to tailor to those different participants, those different stakeholders that you identified. And then also, again, identifying those different resources to include and how that will look. Like Joe mentioned, your workshop and Tribal Civics Project won't look like Leech Lakes. It won't look like Turtle Mountains. And I think that's really the beauty of each nation really meeting their own needs and identifying the needs of their community. So we're excited to work with you all in 2 weeks to hear kind of your feedback and think about how we can move this work forward. So before we close, does anybody have any questions about kind of the next steps or what to expect as we move forward in the workshop series?
I just had a question am I on mute?
No, you're good.
I'm good. Okay. I just had a question about the possibility of a debrief. Is that on anyone's schedule, or is that the plan to go forward with? I'm looking at Bill because he threw me on the spot. Just kidding. I'm just wondering if that's the plan or if that is the intent for our team, I guess, as a whole. I'm just wondering.
So we definitely encourage you all to connect between workshops. We know your schedules can be quite busy. Finding time to meet everyone together can be challenging, but it's definitely worthwhile. You guys had really fruitful group discussions here. So the opportunity to kind of dive deeper into that will allow you to get more out of each of the workshops and come in and kind of dive deeper into the work. So we certainly encourage you to connect in between sessions, knowing, of course, there's only 2 weeks until the next one. It is really meaningful. So if you're able to swing it with your schedules or utilize a tool like Jamboard to kind of share information as an open source with each other, it can be really helpful to get your project ideas out there.
Carissa, maybe me to kind of respond, and since we got a number of the people from education on here, do you think we could add it as like end of the topic for the ed committee meeting on Tuesday? So we could get through the rest of the committee agenda and then maybe just at the end, because Dan, Lisa, Kellen, Rebecca, you and I will be there, and it would just be pulling in David and a couple of the other ones.
I'm not on the committee.
No, I know. So we would just do it like at the end of the committee meeting.
That makes sense to me. I think that's next week.
Yeah. Yeah, next Tuesday. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Lisa, can you pull it off? I think that was a yes.
I think it'll happen. I'm positive in that.
Okay. I'll reach out to her.
All right. Well, way to go, folks. I just want to go ahead and we opened with a quote. We want to wrap up with one. So this one is from Valentina Mardanian, who is another contributor on our civics guide. And here she says, a self-governing people must constantly attend to the historical and the civic education to process by which raising generations that owns the past and takes the helm and charts a course towards the future. So we just want to say, miigwech, thank you all for being with us here today. It was a lot of fun. You all engaged a lot. We learned so much about the unique skill sets of this group. And we're looking forward to connecting with you next time. So with that, I'll just say miigwech and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Miigwech, everyone. Give yourselves a round of applause. You guys were all great today.